Hey, what is going on, pals? Welcome back to yet again another video. And for today, we do have some roster mania or some roster changes to talk about. In this video, just going to give a little bit of a preface for it. I am going to be talking primarily about Rise Nation. So for those who don't know, I'm going to give a very quick recap about it, and then I'm going to go in depth with the old Rise Nation roster, what the team meant, and what kind of led to their potential roster changes that they didn't make. So essentially what happened today was that Rise Nation decided to release the entire team except for Looney, meaning that Classic, Slacked, as well as Octane are no longer going to be on the roster. And not even an hour after that, Luminosity Gaming comes out of nowhere and starts to tweet out that they've officially picked up Classic, Slacked, and Octane, along with Saints, going to be their new roster heading into Infinite Warfare, meaning that Spacely, Study, and Nameless are going to be free agents for right now. Will they go and join Rise Nation? Who knows? Probably not, according to what we've heard and stuff like that. But still, that is some major stuff to see. I'm also going to be posting the LG article down in the description. I'm going to read the last paragraph, like a very short summary of it, so you guys get a little bit of an idea. And then we're going into Rise Nation. I'll be reading their tweets, what was tweeted out about them, and so on and so forth. So this is effective immediately. Spacely, Study, and Nameless are considered free agents and can explore their options while they transition to their new home. Luminosity will continue to pay their salary and provide assistance where needed in their search. All three of them have been nothing but professionals since joining LG and always represented the organization to the best of their ability. So, not going to get into Luminosity Gaming. This is going to be a completely different video, but let's give a little bit of an update as to where Rise Nation players are going. So, just to give you guys a little bit of an update, I'm now going to be showing you guys the tweets that actually came from Rise Nation. After teaming for all of Black Ops 3, Classic, Octane, and Slacked have decided to part ways with Looney and the organization, and then they later said, with that being said, going into IW, Looney will be looking for 3 teammates to compete alongside. Hashtag Rise with us. So this is obviously a major surprise. This was a team who was like a really solid team throughout Black Ops 3. I mean, the beginning of Black Ops 3, people were saying this is Black Ops 3 or Advanced Warfare, but Black Ops 3's version of FaZe in AW because of how close they were in contingency to Optic Gaming, winning the Totinos Invitational, which was technically not a tournament, but it was a showcase, winning UMG South Carolina, which there were some issues with that as well. But, hey, they had some really good placements, and they were a very consistent team, probably the most consistent team in some ways throughout like in-game stuff rather than tournament placements, but in-game stuff than any other team in all of Black Ops 3. So they were a very consistent team, and it's very surprising to me that we are going to see this team kind of split up with one another. I did reach out trying to find out what was kind of going on with the team at the time. I was told that will be released later, so I didn't want to obviously infringe on that, not at all trying to be like a news channel. Just want to talk about this as far as my thoughts. I really enjoy talking about this kind of stuff, so that's kind of like the edge where I'm coming from. So one thing that I really like to do is kind of give a little bit of a background on how this roster formed, where the players were at, kind of coming into this team, and try to maybe dissect where some of this roster stuff maybe could have kind of boiled in from the very start of the team. Maybe there was a little bit of animosity throughout the season, but they couldn't really make changes, so on and so forth. So for those who don't know, actually heading into MLG World Finals, which is the final event of Advanced Warfare, the roster actually consisted of Burns, Aches, Wheats, and Chino, which many people don't actually know that roster ever existed or didn't really remember that it had happened. But it was kind of like a thrown together team toward the end of the season. Players are coming from different teams, and obviously this team was able to form. So like I said, there's much different change where all 4 players are completely different for the last event of AW to the first event or showcase of Black Ops 3. So heading into this roster, Slacked was previously on Elevate, which is where he had been throughout most of the AW year. I believe he was on Justice before that. Being with TJ Halley, Saints, and Octane at MLG World Finals. Octane, who I just talked about, as well as Slacked, had been on a breakout year. For those who remember, Octane was one of the breakout players in Advanced Warfare, alongside like players like Hook and TJ Halley and many other players who were kind of known throughout that title. He was definitely in my list, probably one of the best, if not the best, alongside of Hook throughout that year as far as a breakout player, kind of like a rookie type of player. I know he'd played in Ghost, but anyway, you got to get my point, right? Which he had played for Team Envious. I know he had played for like Justice, DT, Prophecy, a number of different teams before that, where he'd actually just left one of his previous teammates, being Looney, on that roster only a couple kind of short notice, and actually had decided to form with Elevate heading into MLG World Finals, the final event where he only actually played for that roster or that organization for one event. In Classic, who at MLG World Finals was on Denial, where he ended up having a 2nd place finish, and all of them were kind of involved with a roster move, and then only a tournament later, or a few months later really, they were all on the same team together. So to me, this roster was kind of like, whenever I first saw this roster form, I was like, did they know? Like, did they realize? And I know there was some bad blood between Looney and Octane. I actually have some footage on my camera somewhere. If I find it, I'll put it on here, but I probably won't. Actually, of Looney, whenever they had just beaten Rise Nation, I think at MLG World Finals, and he walks by and he like says like he like yells at him, and it was like, how in the world can these guys team together after that had happened? But they make it work. They make it work, right? And they play very, very well. Like I said, they win, technically, the first 2 LAN tournaments that come up. However, though, that consistency would kind of come to a little bit of a halt at some point around the time of ESWC, which obviously, I feel like one of the first, international type of tournaments. There wasn't really too many. I think it was just Optic Gaming, FaZe, and Rise Nation who went to this tournament from NA at least. There was a lot of, powerhouse EU teams who were there at the time, which we didn't know were going to be as good as they were. Obviously, one of them finishing as a runner-up at COD XP, being Splice and whatnot. But it was like right around the time of ESWC, and this is just a personal opinion. I feel like that's where they kind of started to slow down a little bit. And of course, at the time, no one knew how talented at Splice, no one knew how talented, kind of Infuse was at the time, or even Fab Games, who wasn't even a team yet. But anyway, no one knew how talented the European region was at that time. They didn't know the potential that was going to be coming in just a few short months right after that. So I think they took this loss really to heart. They kind of took that as like, wow, we just lost to a lower ranking team. When in reality, that team was actually very, very good. At least they weren't to their full potential, but they were still a very talented roster. No one would, go home sad after losing to Splice at the time, realizing what they would do just a few short months later. And they ended up losing that match, and you might be saying, well, they finished 3rd through 4th, but they did end up playing against Millennium. I believe they barely won in like a Game 5 situation, but when it comes down to it, when it comes to Call of Duty players and Call of Duty tournaments in general, when you're playing after you're already out of the tournament, when you're not guaranteed first and you have to play another match, it's kind of like, it's money is money, and that's great, and I'm sure they're probably playing for that, but that's really the only thing that you're focusing on. It's just like, we're not going to win the tournament. Let's just try to get as much money as possible here. Like, no one wants to play in this matchup. No one wants to play in it. And along with that, they didn't really have the best placements kind of heading down the line. MLG Anaheim Open, they ended up placing 3rd right after that, obviously placing 3rd at the ESWC, which is not a bad placing, right? I'm not saying that's a bad placing whatsoever. There's a few online tournaments where they do pretty well. They ended up finishing 4th in the Stage 2 regular season. So there was a point in Stage 2 regular season, I want to say it was maybe not like mid-season, but it was like a few weeks before the last 2 weeks. I guess like 4 weeks before the entire league had ended for Stage 2, right? They were really, really struggling for consistency. Like, they were having a number of different problems. I know Octane was just not himself during that time. There's a lot of reasons why that is, that most people speculate. But the chemistry just wasn't, the team just wasn't working correctly. Like, they were getting things done, but they just weren't winning games, and no one really knew why. I was kind of predicting this team was going to make a roster change at that point, because I really didn't know what was going to happen, but the roster lock had already gone down. There was just a lot of things kind of coming into this roster. I was like, how are these guys still together, and how are they still being consistent, even though they're losing in the Stage 2 regular season, at least toward that little portion? And then they started to turn it up to the last few weeks, and they won a few games here and there. But it was like, it wasn't that they played bad. It was just they had a few off weeks for a good amount of period of time. But that was kind of like, that kind of described their entire season for me, right? It was like they had a really consistent toward the first few weeks of the CWL or their entire Call of Duty run through Black Ops 3. And then one little thing just makes them go absolutely in a different direction. And it's like they can't really recover from that. That's kind of what happened in the CWL for me as well, along with their season. They have one bad loss, they have one bad tournament, one instance kind of ruined to me this roster, what could have been a major team to compete heading into the later stages. Maybe it was just a really, really good start that they had into the game. Maybe they just played really well at the beginning of the game. But something just happened with the roster where they went from a top 2 team, guaranteed, if not a top 1 at times. People were saying they were the best team in the game before Optic Gaming started to bring a little bit of a stride back. But it was like they went from being a top 2 team to a top 4, top 5, like they were slowly but surely kind of coming out of that conversation. Are they going to beat this team? Are they going to hang with the new Team Envious roster? They get stopped every time they now play this new Team Envious roster. Now they're top 3. They can't be elevated. It was just like time after time after time. It was like they were slowly starting to fall down the hill of what was the top teams in Call of Duty, and they couldn't really hang with them at all times. However, I will say that in essence of also pointing at the fact that they were the only team in Stage 2 to have a positive game type record in every single game type, meaning that they won more games than they lost in every single game type, and no other team in the CWL had done that, including the team who plays first, the team who plays second, so on and so forth, right? They're the only team to do that. It goes to show their consistency as a team. I remember casting over them many times and saying, it's hard to call out an objective player for the roster because you will see them constantly having players in the hill at all times. You'd see like a minute 30, maybe even 2 minutes for each and every player because they all played the role of what Black Ops 3 was in Hardpoint, which was flooding, right? Everyone knows Black Ops 3 Hardpoint was about flooding the hill, getting as many bodies in the hill as you can, and they really worked so well with that. You had Slacked, who to me was by far a top 10 player, Classic, who could definitely be in the argument as well, Looney, who definitely did his role, but he wasn't necessarily putting up the most numbers because he was getting in the hill a lot of the times. And you had Octane, who to me was by far a top 2 AR throughout Advanced Warfare, but in Black Ops 3 kind of fell behind just a little bit after the whole Aches thing with Team Envious kind of went away. It seemed like Slasher was a little bit more freed up to do what he wanted, and ever since that happened, it was like Formal, Slasher, those are the top 2 ARs in the game, and then you have Octane in the back, and he wasn't being the most consistent, like I said, through Stage 2. A lot of the problems that they were having was during the time where he was kind of struggling, but like I said, they came from undoubtedly top 2 to the last 2 events of Black Ops 3, both placing top 6, which I believe was that, like I said, MLG Orlando Open and the Call of Duty XP, which is the main tournament that you want to be focusing on. That's the main tournament that you are focused on for, obviously, a number of different reasons. It's a $2 million prize pool, for God's sake. You want to be playing your best, and I think after a top 6 finish, they're thinking maybe there's a problem with the roster, and I think it was a lot of internal issues. I think there were some chemistry problems that probably went down with the team, especially the fact it wasn't like the team splits up, guys, this isn't working. It's that there's one odd man out, and 3 others are trying to make something happen. And the reason why those 3 players can be trying to make something happen is the fact that when it comes down to MLG Vegas, obviously getting that spot, you have to have at least 3/4 of your original roster. So, but as far as I know, the spot goes with the players, not the organization. So Looney, who's currently looking for looking for 3, doesn't actually have that spot, so he's not guaranteed to go to MLG Vegas right now unless he finds 3 other players, which could be from another team, which I'll talk about in another video. And like I said, I'm not sure what stirred up these problems. That's going to be something that apparently it's going to be released soon, according to the source that I was given, or the source that I was talking to. So we'll see what kind of happened with the roster. We'll see what kind of formed. I'm assuming it was probably a chemistry problem, or it had to do with the players maybe having some disagreements and whatnot. But to me, this is a major deal to talk about because they were undoubtedly a top team throughout all of Black Ops 3 and deserved to have the title as probably one of the most, if not the most consistent team throughout all of Black Ops 3, at least in my opinion. I mean, like I said, they were incredible in both online and offline tournaments. So yeah, guys, the old Rise Nation is no more. Essentially, 3 new players have kind of found a new home over on Luminosity Gaming alongside of Saints, which is kind of interesting because there's actually kind of like a little bit of a bond between all these players because essentially what happened was that Octane left Looney, which I kind of described a little bit earlier. Octane, who was on Envious with Looney, he leaves right before MLG World Finals starts. It means Looney is with JCap. They go and find Goonjar. They also find Jur. They get him on loan from TCM. He's out of the picture, which is not a very good, transition. It wasn't smooth. Let's just say that. It was a very awkward type of situation. So he goes toward Elevate, where obviously there's a roster change that needs to be made because why Octane's coming over to the roster? Well, who do they get rid of? They actually get rid of Classic, meaning that now Octane, Slacked, and Saints are going to be teaming with each other on Elevate heading into the MLG World Finals. So 3 out of the 4 players have reunited with one another, which is kind of interesting, and the one player who they got rid of is now returning back to the team. So what could have been the same roster had they gotten rid of TJ Halley instead of Classic, this team could have already been a team in Advanced Warfare, which is kind of interesting to talk about. So this is obviously a little bit of an interesting transition. These guys have been so close to teaming with one another, but have obviously 3/4 of them have teamed in the past. Only for one event, but, anyway, it still kind of makes sense. So it's kind of like an interesting little, circle of things that have happened in their previous history. But it is interesting to see that they are going to be teaming yet again, in some ways, but now over on Luminosity Gaming. I will say this, and I will continue to say this. Mr. Octane always looks good in blue. Whether he's on Envious or now he's on Luminosity Gaming, he always seems to perform better when he's in blue. And I'm not forgetting Justice either. So yeah, guys, let me know down in the comments what your guys' thoughts are on this new team. Essentially, Looney's out, Saints is in, we're good to go. But it's a new title. It's Infinite Warfare. Anything can happen. Players can be Amazing in one title, terrible in the next. Granted, I would compare Black Ops 3 to Infinite Warfare as pretty similar as far as most things are considered, but hey, anything can happen. A player can be great in one title, like I said, bad in another, or vice versa. It's hard to predict, it's hard to assume what's going to happen, especially with how roster changes are going right now. So, I'll be making a video about Luminosity Gaming, their roster, how they obviously kind of split up my thoughts on their team in a separate one. I didn't want to make these two together because this one was all about Rise Nation and their transition to LG. And like I said, I'll be making a video about LG, their previous roster, an in-depth video, probably in the next one. So stay tuned for that. If you guys, like I said, did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like. Don't forget to comment down below what you guys' thoughts are about this new team, and maybe even about LG as well, some speculation that you guys might have had. So yeah, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much again for watching it. I'll see you guys all later. Have a great day.